Alright, so today we're going into equations of circles. We've done area and circumference, and so now we're moving on to the next topic. So our equation we're going to be using is in standard form. So it looks like x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So I'm going to tell you what each of these variables means. So h is your x coordinate of the center. I'm going to give you a point like 3, 2. And so you're going to need to know that 3 is the x coordinate of the point I gave you. So 3 is what h is as well. So k is going to be our y coordinate of the center. So h and k go together. Remember, h is that x coordinate and k is the y. And then this last part of the equation you have is r squared, which is going to be that radius squared. So we take whatever the radius is and multiply it by itself. So if it's given to you as a number, you have to find the square root to find the radius. If we just give you the radius, to put it into the equation, you have to square it first. So the first equation I give you is x minus 5 squared plus y minus 1 squared, and it's equal to 64. So the first thing I'm going to look for is that center. And remember, your center comes from the number with the x and the number with the y. The easiest way to do it is to pull it down into a point. Up here I have minus 5, so you want to think of the opposite. So my x coordinate is going to be 5. And then for the y coordinate, I have minus 1, so the opposite of minus 1 is a positive 1. So I know my center is at 5, 1. The next thing I need to find is my radius. And so here I told you, if you're given a number as your radius, you have to take the square root of it. So I have r squared equals 64. Now to get r by itself, that's where we have to undo it being squared. So I'm going to take the square root of r squared. The square root is 64. When I take the square root of r squared, I'm left with r equals, and the square root of 64, plug it in. It's whatever number times itself gives you 64. That leaves me with 8. So I know my center is at 5, 1, and my radius is at 8. So the second example I give you, x minus 3 squared plus y squared equals 25. So I first need to find my center, but if you see here, I don't have y with the parentheses. If there's nothing there, we need to assume that it's 0. So I'm going to rewrite this, x minus 3 squared plus y minus 0 squared is equal to 25. Now if you don't need this and you can see it off the bat, that's fine. I'm going to pull my center down, so remember I'm using the minus 3 and the minus 0. The opposite of minus 3 is just 3, and then 0 has no opposite, so it's at 0. So my center for this circle equation is 3, 0. And now I need to find my radius. And remember, all we do is we take the square root of that number. So the square root of 25, whatever number times itself gives you 25, is 5. Now my last example of this type, I have x plus 2 squared plus y plus 9 squared equals 196. What's different here though is that in our parentheses we have these plus signs, so that's going to change our center. So now I have the plus 2 as my x coordinate, and you think the opposite. So instead of positive 2, I'm going to have negative 2, I now have the plus 9, again think the opposite, so my y coordinate is negative 9. Now same thing with our radius, I need to take the square root of 196, and when I do that, I end up with 14. So I know my center is at negative 2, negative 9, and my radius is 14. Alright, so these next 3 examples, I'm asking you to write the equation given the following information. So I'm going to give you the center and the radius, and I want you to write that general equation for it. So remember, we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So the first example I have, I'm telling you that the center is at negative 1, 5, and the radius is 4. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and use some colors here so you can see where I'm playing everything in. For my x value, my center, I'm going to use red. For the y value, I'm going to use this greenish blue. And then for the radius, I'm going to use blue. So I'm plugging this into that general equation that I just wrote up here at the top. So I have parentheses, nothing happens with that x, minus, remember my h value is that x value of the point. So I have minus, and in parentheses a negative 1 squared, plus y minus my k was the y value of the point, which is 5 squared, and it's equal to r squared. My radius is 4 here, So I have 4 squared. Now I have to get rid of some of this stuff to make it look like an actual equation. The first thing is I have this minus a negative here. When I have that, what happens is it turns positive because a negative times a negative is a positive. So x plus 1 squared plus, I don't have that situation here, I just have y minus 5 squared, and it's equal to, instead of 4 squared, we're going to go ahead and multiply it out. So 4 squared, or 4 times 4, is 16, and this is your equation. Now my second equation I want you to write has a center at 0, -7, and a radius of 1. So I'm going to label my center as h and k. And so now I'm going to plug it into that equation at the top. I have x minus h, which is a -7, squared, plus y minus k, which is a 0, squared. And it's equal to r squared. My radius here is 1, so 1 squared. I'm going to clean up some of that stuff. Remember, minus a negative is a plus, so x plus 7 squared. Plus, you can leave it as y minus 0 if you want. I'm going to rewrite it, though, as y squared. And it's equal to 1 squared, or 1 times 1, which is 1. So here is your second equation. So these next two examples, I'm asking you to find the area of the circle from its equation. So I'm still going to go ahead and list out the center and the radius. Remember, your center, we look at the numbers with the x and the y. We have a minus 3 here, so I'm going to take the opposite. So that means my center is going to be a positive 3. And then with the y is a positive 4, so think the opposite, and you have -4 as your center. My radius is when I look at the number on the other side of the equation. So I have 81, and I'm taking the square root of 81, which leaves me as 9 with my radius. And now from the previous unit, I know that my area is equal to pi times my radius squared. I can plug that in. I have area equals pi instead of r. I'm going to have 9 now, squared. 9 squared, or 9 times 9, is 81, and we still leave pi there with it. So if you notice this number that was in the equation, if you put pi with it, that gives you the area of the circle. Now the last example I'm going to do for this one is the same thing. I'm wanting to find the area from the circle's equation. I know my center, instead of positive 2, I have -2 as the x value. There's not one with the y, so remember that means we have 0. And my radius is the square root of 121, or 11, because 11 times 11 is 121. Now for area, you could go through like we did on this last one. Or remember, I told you if you take that number in the equation and put pi with it, that gives you your area of that circle. So instead of doing practice problems, you're doing a minor grade today. It's another writing one, and I told you what the prompt is. So I'm asking you to explain your steps to solve the problem below, and I want you to write the equation for a circle with a center of -3,4 and an area of 100 pi. So I know I need the center and the radius, and you're going to get your radius from that area. So my area is equal to pi r squared. I know right now my area is 100 pi. So we've done these problems before. I want to solve for my radius, or my r squared. I'm going to divide both sides by pi because I want to get r squared by itself. When I do that on the left, my pi's cancel out, and I'm left with 100 is equal to. Same thing happens on the right. Pi's cancel out, and I get r squared. To get r by itself, I have to take the square root of both sides. So r is equal to the square root of 100, which is 10. I can now write my equation. So remember, you have that x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. The h and the k come from my center, so I have x, and instead of -3, I have minus a -3, which turns it to +3 squared, plus y minus 4 squared is equal to r squared. And my r here is 10, so 10 squared. And my last step is to perform that squared. So instead of 10 squared, I'm going to have 100. So your minor grade today is you're going to have to solve the same problem, and then in words, you need to write out the process you used to solve this problem.